In the central highlands of Vietnam, near the Laotian border, a small marine observation post sat perched on a ridge no wider than a football field. It was late 1969, deep in the final wet season of the war. The position, known on radio maps as Outpost Thor, was manned by just 18 Marines and 2 South Vietnamese scouts. Their job was simple: on paper, watch the Ho Chi Minh Trail, report movement, and direct artillery fire from battery station miles away in the valley. In practice, it was a lonely, rain-soaked fragment of the war few remembered or even knew existed. The Marines were mostly young, 19, 20, maybe 21. They lived beneath ponchos stretched over sandbags, surrounded by jungle that swallowed every sound. Radio contact came twice daily. Resupply by helicopter was irregular, sometimes every week, sometimes not at all if weather rolled in from Laos. Outpost Thor wasn't supposed to attract attention. It existed as an eye in the wilderness, a dot on a grid map that barely mattered in the Grand Command briefings in Da Nang. But in October, something shifted. The jungle around them grew restless. Night patrols began to vanish into mist before completing their route. The scouts spoke of distant chanting, a sound that meant more than superstition. Tracks appeared in the clay slopes below the wire. By midweek, one Marine counted 30 pairs of footprints leading toward the northern perimeter, all fresh, all pointing uphill. The radio operator sent a situation report, noting possible buildup west of position. Headquarters acknowledged but offered no further support. They were stretched thin. Too many posts, too many hills, not enough men. Then came the sound of bugles. Not the ceremonial kind, but sharp bursts echoing from the dark tree-line, followed by silence. It was the North Vietnamese way of saying "we see you." The Marines adjusted their claymores, loaded their M16s, and waited. The rain thickened, drumming against helmets, masking movement. That night, the ridge flickered with distant flashes, muzzle bursts, probing shots. Nothing major yet, just tests. Still, every man at the outpost knew what it meant. They weren't being harassed. They were being measured. The enemy was counting guns, learning their pattern of fire, their reaction time. By dawn, the radio operator tried again. Multiple contacts overnight. "We may be facing a regiment." Static replied. No air cover, no artillery response. Only jungle mist and a fading signal. It was then that one Marine muttered, half under his breath, "Guess it's just us now." The others didn't argue. They knew he was right. The first full assault came 2 nights later. It began with a distant thud, one mortar, then another, until the entire ridge shook beneath the blast. The jungle flared with light as 82mm shells landed in irregular arcs, tearing through the thin perimeter wire. The Marines dove into their foxholes, counting seconds between impacts, waiting for the barrage to lift. Didn't. The North Vietnamese had studied their position well. They were walking fire uphill, tightening the pattern with every volley. The outpost's radio crackled to life, barely audible through the noise. The forward observer tried to reach the valley fire base, reading off coordinates by memory as fragments rained down around him. The reply was brief and hopeless. Negative fire mission. Guns repositioned. Hold position. The rain had turned the valley road to a swamp. Artillery was out of range. When the barrage finally eased, movement erupted from the tree-line. 300 North Vietnamese soldiers surged upward through the mud, rifles held high, bayonets fixed. Their advance was silent except for the crack of AKs and the wet slap of boots. The Marines returned fire with M16s and M60 machine guns, sweeping the slope in controlled bursts. Flares popped overhead, painting the hillside in flashes of white and red. Corporal Davis, the machine gunner, shifted his barrel until the feed jammed from mud. He cleared it with his knife and fired again, cutting down the first wave before they reached the wire. Another squad circled from the west, testing for weak points. Hand grenades tumbled down the incline, exploding among roots and rainwater. The fight lasted hours, ending only when the jungle swallowed the attackers again. 18 Marines against 300, and somehow they were still standing. They checked ammunition. 2 belts left for the M60, 1 box of flares, and half a crate of rifle rounds. 2 wounded, shrapnel, nothing fatal yet. At dawn, the valley fog rose like smoke from a battlefield. The radio operator managed one brief connection before the batteries gave out. Outpost Thor under siege. Heavy contact. Request evac. No answer came. The transmission cut short, and the red light on the handset blinked once, then died. They began digging deeper trenches that morning. Each man took a turn on the shovel, not speaking much, not needing to. Overhead, the sky hung low and heavy, sealing them into that strip of mud and rock. They didn't yet know that the next night would be worse. By the third night, the pattern was clear. Mortar fire just before midnight, followed by probing bursts from the jungle. Then silence. Each attack drew closer, the enemy pressing to test how long the Marines could keep returning fire. The men were exhausted, soaked to the bone, uniforms caked with red mud. They had eaten their last rations that morning. Cold beans and crackers passed down the trench line like communion. They still held the ridge, but the ammunition was running low, and the radio remained silent. Even the air smelled of metal, gun oil, and rain. When the next barrage came, it felt different. The mortars fell in a perfect circle, closing every escape route. The Marines crouched in their holes as the earth shook, the sound rolling over them like thunder in a barrel. After the final explosion, voices echoed from the darkness. A strange, rhythmic chanting in Vietnamese. It was followed by laughter. The North Vietnamese were taunting them from the jungle. One of the scouts whispered, translating, "They think you'll break tonight." For a long while, no one spoke. Then, somewhere near the center pit, a Marine hummed the opening bars of a tune, low, quiet, uncertain. Another joined in, then another. Within moments, all 18 were singing under their breath, "Home, home, sweet home." The sound carried across the rain, wavering but steady. A thin thread of defiance against 300 men waiting in the dark. They weren't singing for heroism or bravado. They sang to remember. The smell of dry earth back home, the sound of a mother's voice, the idea that somewhere beyond this ridge the world still existed. For that brief moment, the jungle went still. Even the enemy stopped firing. Then, almost on cue, the silence shattered. Machine gun fire erupted from the northern slope. The Marines fired back, using what little ammunition they had left. The tracers cut lines of light through the fog, illuminating the twisted bodies along the wire. A grenade landed near the medic's trench, wounding 2 more. When it was over, dawn crept slowly through the trees. The ridge was a ruin. Sandbags shredded, barrels warped from heat, helmets cracked. But the outpost still stood. Of the 18 Marines, 3 were badly wounded. None had broken, none had run. They were running out of bullets now. But in their silence, there was something stronger. The understanding that if rescue didn't come, they'd face the next night the same way. Together. When daylight finally broke over Outpost Thor, the rain had eased to a thin mist. The jungle below still smoked from the night's fire. For the first time in days, the Marines heard a distant roar overhead, rotors cutting through the morning air. A reconnaissance chopper, risking cloud cover, circled the ridge twice before banking away to mark the coordinates. Within hours, air support followed. The first napalm strike hit the base of the hill, forcing the North Vietnamese to retreat down the ravine. Dust and fire rolled through the valley. The surviving Marines didn't cheer. They just watched, too tired to feel relief. When the rescue helicopters came at midday, they landed in half-cleared mud, blades scattering shell casings and blood-soaked bandages. The Marines helped their wounded aboard first, then climbed in one by one. None of them spoke. As they lifted off, the outpost that had consumed their nights grew small below, a scar on the ridge, ringed by black craters and broken trees. The place that had nearly become their grave faded into the haze like a ghost. In the official reports that followed, the battle was barely mentioned. Outpost Thor sustained repeated enemy contact. Casualties: 3 Kia, 6 WIA. Position later abandoned. No medals, no headlines. It was just one of many forgotten fights along the border in a year filled with them. But among those who had been there, the memory never left. Years later, in quiet reunions and veterans' halls, someone would bring it up. The night they sang "Home, Sweet Home" in the middle of hell. They would fall silent for a while after that, each man seeing again the glow of flares over the ridge, the mud, the rain, the sense of being completely alone yet somehow unbroken. For them, the song wasn't about going home. It was about refusing to give up what home meant. 18 men, surrounded by 300, clinging to a hill no one else remembered, but holding it long enough to remind each other that courage isn't about survival. It's about standing your ground when the world expects you to vanish.